What if a moment meant to humiliate you became the spark that ignited the downfall of an empire worth hundreds of millions? Nia Jackson wasn't just any maid. At 29, she was a force, a fiercely intelligent black woman who had escaped the shadows of her childhood in Detroit's toughest neighborhoods to carve out a life on her own terms. Yet here she was, working as a live-in housekeeper for the Lockwood family, billionaires whose wealth was as vast as their arrogance. The Lockwood mansion stood like a fortress on the cliffs of Malibu, every inch dripping with opulence. But behind its polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers lurked something darker, entitlement disguised as superiority. And the heir to the Lockwood fortune, Preston Lockwood Jr., was the worst of them all. One night, after a party filled with wealthy guests who saw Nia only as invisible background noise, Preston decided to make an example of her. Drunk on power and privilege, he ordered her to crawl across the marble floor, like an animal. "Crawl," he sneered, voice thick with condescension. "Show everyone your place." Nia's heart thundered, but she did not break. Her eyes burned with a quiet fire that no amount of humiliation could snuff out. That night, as she wiped tears nobody saw, she swore this wouldn't be the end of her story, because sometimes the strongest power grows from the deepest pain. Little did Preston know. The very next day, Nia would set in motion a plan that would shake the Lockwood empire to its core. For more gripping tales from the hidden corners of justice and beyond, subscribe to Dark Side of Luna, where the shadows hold the truth. The morning light filtered through the towering windows of the Lockwood estate, but Nia's world was anything but bright. Aaliyah's first day wasn't easy. The mansion buzzed with the usual chaos. The twins darted through the hallways, knocking over expensive vases, pulling at the curtains, and shouting at the staff. The previous nannies had left notes detailing the twins' tricks, but Aaliyah wasn't intimidated. She observed quietly, making mental notes rather than reacting. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the house settled into uneasy silence, Aaliyah sat in the grand kitchen sipping a cup of tea. The twins peeked from behind a corner, plotting their next prank. Jayden whispered, "Let's see how long she lasts before she loses it." Jada giggled, "She seems too calm. Maybe she's boring." But Aaliyah had already guessed they were testing her limits, and she had a plan that wasn't about control or punishment, it was about connection. The next morning, instead of laying down strict rules, Aaliyah invited the twins into the garden. "Tell me your favorite things," she said softly. "What makes you happy?" Jayden hesitated, then shrugged. "I like racing my bike." Jada's eyes lit up. "I like painting." "Then let's do that," Aaliyah smiled. She spent the day riding bikes with Jayden, letting him lead the race, laughing when he won. With Jada, she pulled out old canvases and paints, encouraging her creativity, praising every brushstroke. For the first time, the twins felt seen, not as problems to be fixed, but as children with dreams and emotions. At dinner, the millionaire father, Mr. Charles Whitmore, a stern man used to commanding everything in his world, noticed the change immediately. "Mrs. Johnson, I hope you're aware this household isn't like any other," he said, eyes sharp. Aaliyah nodded calmly. "I understand, sir, but I believe every child deserves respect, patience, and love." That night, as the twins fell asleep peacefully for the first time in months, Aaliyah sat by the window, thinking about the walls she needed to break down, not just in the children's hearts, but in the household's rigid world. Despite the cruel command from the previous night, she woke with a resolve sharper than any diamond hanging from the chandelier. She knew Preston's arrogance was a facade, a fragile mask covering a family built on secrets, lies, and ruthless ambition. Nia's sharp mind wasn't just trained on cleaning or serving, it was trained on survival and on justice. After clocking in, she slipped away unnoticed to the one place Preston and his privileged friends never dared to look, the family's private home office, a glass-encased sanctuary stacked with ledgers, contracts, and digital backups of their sprawling $330 million business empire. She had learned from whispers and late-night overhears that this office was the heart of Lockwood's power, the place where every financial move was planned and every dirty secret was hidden. With trembling fingers, Nia accessed the family's computer system using a password she had overheard Preston mutter drunkenly during one of his boozy rants. As the screen lit up, The scale of Lockwood's empire unfolded before her eyes. Offshore accounts, shell companies, tax evasion schemes, all meticulously documented. She downloaded files onto a flash drive she had hidden in her uniform, knowing this evidence could bring down the empire that had humiliated her and countless others. But she also knew this was just the beginning. The real power was knowing how to use it. Just as she was about to leave, the office door creaked open. Preston stood there, eyes wild with suspicion and anger. "Nia," he spat, "what are you doing in my office?" Nia's heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. "I was looking for a mop." Preston's laugh was bitter, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Don't lie to me." He stepped forward, his expensive leather shoes clicking sharply on the floor. "You're no ordinary maid, are you?" Nia met his gaze without flinching. "I'm exactly who you think I am, and more." Before Preston could react, the sound of tires screeching outside the estate drew their attention. A black SUV pulled up abruptly, and the driver stepped out, flashing a badge. Federal agents. "Preston Lockwood," one of the agents called out. "You're under investigation for money laundering, tax fraud, and embezzlement." Preston's face drained of color as the agents began reading him his rights. Nia stood tall, the flash drive safe in her pocket. The humiliation, the years of servitude, the cruel command to crawl, all of it led to this moment. She had turned the tables, not with violence or anger, but with quiet strength, cunning, and the power of truth. As Preston was escorted away in handcuffs, Nia's phone buzzed with a message from a lawyer she had secretly contacted weeks before, a top civil rights attorney who had been building the case with her evidence. The empire was crumbling, and Nia was rising. As Preston Lockwood's luxury car disappeared from the driveway, escorted by the stern faces of federal agents, a wave of disbelief swept through the grand halls of the Lockwood estate. The family's legacy, their untouchable wealth, was unraveling right before their eyes, and the woman they had belittled for years was the one who had pulled the strings. But for Nia Jackson, this was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The morning after the arrest, the media swarmed the estate, desperate for answers. Headlines screamed about the billionaire's downfall and the shadowy figure behind the leak. Few knew the truth, that a maid, a black woman with nothing but grit and a fierce will, had orchestrated the empire's collapse from within. Yet Nia did not bask in the spotlight. Instead, she retreated to a modest apartment she shared with her mother and younger sister, her phone buzzing with calls from journalists, activists, and powerful allies who wanted to support her cause. Her lawyer advised her to keep a low profile for now, warning that the Lockwood family would not go down quietly. They would fight back with everything they had: money, influence, and dirty tricks. One afternoon, as Nia prepared dinner for her family, there was a knock on her door. Standing there was a woman in a tailored suit, her eyes sharp but kind. "Ms. Jackson," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Danielle Carter, director of the Justice Reform Coalition. We've been following your story closely, and we want to help." Over the next few weeks, Nia worked closely with Danielle and a team of lawyers and investigators. Together, they uncovered even deeper layers of corruption, illegal labor practices in Lockwood factories overseas, environmental violations hidden behind layers of shell companies, and connections to political bribes that reached the highest offices in Washington. Nia's fight had become bigger than personal revenge. It was a battle for justice on a scale she had never imagined. But as the Lockwood empire crumbled, so did the walls of secrecy that protected those who wielded power. Threats arrived in the form of anonymous letters, strange cars parked outside her apartment, and late-night phone calls filled with silence. Nia's resolve hardened. She was no longer just a maid. She was a symbol, a black woman who had stood tall when everyone else had tried to keep her down. And she was ready for whatever came next. As the weeks unfolded, Nia Jackson's life transformed from quiet servitude to a battleground where every move was met with resistance, and every victory carved a deeper path toward justice. With the support of the Justice Reform Coalition, Nia became a reluctant public figure. She spoke at rallies, shared her story with national news outlets, and connected with other survivors of the Lockwood Empire's abuses. The narrative was no longer about a maid humiliated by a rich boy. It was about systemic corruption, racial injustice, and the power of resilience. But behind the scenes, the Lockwood family was plotting their comeback. Preston's sister, Miranda Lockwood, a ruthless executive with a knack for crisis management, took charge of the family's dwindling assets. She launched a smear campaign against Nia, accusing her of theft and fraud, attempting to discredit her in the media and the courts. Nia's phone buzzed constantly with hate messages and veiled threats. A car followed her home one night, and when she reported it to the police, the response was slow, too slow. The system she was fighting against was riddled with blind spots designed to protect the powerful. But Nia wasn't alone. Danielle Carter and a growing network of activists, lawyers, and ordinary people rallied to her side. They organized fundraisers to cover legal fees, launched social media campaigns to amplify her voice, and pressured elected officials to open investigations into Lockwood's political connections. In the courtroom, the evidence was damning. Nia's flash drive contained thousands of documents proving not only financial crimes, but also environmental destruction that had poisoned communities near Lockwood factories. Victims came forward, adding their voices to the chorus demanding accountability. The trial became a national spectacle, with cameras capturing the tension in every room. Preston, once arrogant and untouchable, sat shackled, his eyes hollow. Miranda's calculated smirk faded as the truth exposed the cracks in their empire. Then came the day of the verdict. The courtroom was packed. Nia sat with Danielle by her side, nerves masked by determination. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber. On charges of money laundering, tax evasion, environmental violations, and conspiracy to obstruct justice, the court finds the defendants guilty as charged. Gasps filled the room. The Lockwood empire, worth over $330 million, was dismantled. Corporate assets seized, executives sentenced, and restitution ordered to the affected communities. But the most powerful moment came after the verdict, when Nia stepped forward and spoke directly to the courtroom and the nation. "This is more than my victory," she said, her voice steady and strong. "It's a testament to the power of truth and the courage to stand when the world tries to make you crawl. To every person who's ever been made to feel less, your story matters and justice can be won." Her words rippled beyond the courtroom, inspiring a movement that challenged the very foundations of power and privilege. And through it all, Nia Jackson stood tall, a Black woman who had turned humiliation into strength, a maid who had destroyed an empire, and a beacon of justice for those still fighting in the shadows. The twist, justice delivered just when everyone thought the Lockwood empire was finished. A secret emerged that no one saw coming. As the dust settled, Nia received an unexpected visitor at her modest apartment, a sleek black envelope, sealed with an intricate gold crest she didn't recognize. Inside was a single key and a note. "The final truth lies where the money hides. Use this wisely." A friend driven by curiosity and courage, Nia followed the clue to a hidden vault beneath an abandoned Lockwood property on the outskirts of the city. There, she uncovered files revealing that the empire's true fortune wasn't just in cash or assets, but in stolen patents, suppressed inventions, and intellectual property taken from communities and innovators around the world, many of whom were people of color. Among the documents was proof that Preston's humiliation of her, the order to crawl like a dog, was meant to break her spirit because she had discovered this secret and threatened to expose it earlier. But the most explosive revelation was a covert agreement signed by high-profile politicians and business leaders, implicating them in the cover-up. With this new evidence, Nia didn't just bring down one family. She ignited a reckoning that swept through the highest ranks of power. The corrupt fell, the silenced were heard, and justice expanded beyond what anyone thought possible. And through it all, Nia Jackson, the woman who had been forced to crawl, now walked with a crown made not of gold, but of unbreakable will and truth. For more gripping tales from the hidden corners of justice and beyond, subscribe to Dark Side of Luna, where the shadows hold the truth. Days turned into weeks, and Aaliyah's presence began to ripple through the household like a gentle but unstoppable tide. The twins' behavior shifted gradually, but it wasn't just the children who were affected. The entire atmosphere of the mansion started to change. At first, the staff noticed small things. The twins stopped waking up screaming at night. The once frequent broken items in the house became rare. and laughter replaced the usual tension. But the real transformation was beneath the surface, in the hearts of Jayden and Jada. One afternoon, while dusting the shelves in the twins' playroom, Aaliyah found a stack of letters hidden under a pile of toys. Curious, she carefully unfolded one. It was written in a shaky child's handwriting. "Dear Mommy and Daddy, I'm sorry I'm not perfect. I just want you to love me." Her heart clenched. These children, born into luxury, were starving for the very thing money couldn't buy: unconditional love. That evening, during the family dinner, Aaliyah saw Mr. Whitmore's face clouded with fatigue and frustration. The pressure to maintain his empire had made him distant, and his children had borne the brunt. After the meal, Aaliyah asked softly, "Sir, when was the last time you spent time with Jayden and Jada? Really spent time?" Mr. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "I'm busy running a business that feeds this family. That's how I provide for them." Aaliyah smiled gently but firmly. Providing is important, but so is being present. Sometimes the richest gifts are moments, not money. The following weekend, she organized a family outing to the nearby park. Reluctantly at first, Mr. Whitmore agreed to come. That day, something remarkable happened. Jayden challenged his father to a race. Mr. Whitmore, surprised but willing, accepted. They ran side by side, the serious businessman shedding his armor of stoicism, laughing with his son as if for the first time. Jada, shy but excited, showed her father her paintings, explaining each color and stroke with pride. Mr. Whitmore listened intently, his usual stern expression melting into one of genuine interest. For the first time, the Whitmore mansion felt like a home, not a fortress. But the peace was fragile. One evening, a temp worker reported a break-in attempt near the estate. The city had been experiencing a rise in crime, and Mr. Whitmore's enemies in business circles were known to play dirty. Aaliyah, sensing the tension, stepped forward. "I'll keep the children safe. You focus on protecting the business." When the threat escalated, anonymous threats and sabotage attempts, the household's unity was tested. Aaliyah worked tirelessly, coordinating security, comforting the children, and standing firm against fear. The climax came one stormy night when masked intruders tried to breach the mansion. Aaliyah, drawing on her courage and quick thinking, led Jayden and Jada to a secure room, called the police, and stayed calm as sirens wailed in the distance. The attackers were caught, and justice was served swiftly. In the aftermath, Mr. Whitmore looked at Aaliyah with newfound respect and gratitude. "You didn't just take care of the house or the children," he said quietly. "You saved this family." Aaliyah smiled, eyes shining. Sometimes, the impossible just takes the right person willing to try. Jayden and Jada, now calmer and happier, hugged Aaliyah tightly. No nanny had lasted with the Millionaire's twins, until a black maid did the impossible. And through patience, love, and courage, she brought justice not just in safety, but in healing a fractured family. The weeks following the break-in attempt were a turning point, not just for the Whitmore family, but for Aaliyah herself. The mansion no longer felt like a gilded cage, but a place where real change could take root. But the road to healing was still long and winding. Aaliyah found herself growing closer to the twins each day. Jayden, who had always worn a mask of defiance, began opening up about his fears. One evening, while sitting under the stars in the garden, Jayden's voice cracked as he admitted, "I'm scared, Aaliyah. I'm scared of disappointing my dad, of not being enough." Aaliyah reached over, squeezing his small hand firmly. "You're more than enough, Jayden. Your worth isn't tied to anyone's expectations. You're a bright, brave boy who deserves love for just being you." Jada, meanwhile, revealed her own struggles. Despite her artistic talent, she felt invisible in a family that prioritized success and business deals over feelings. "Sometimes I think they only see me as a little girl who's supposed to be perfect," she said, brushing tears from her cheeks. Aaliyah held her close. "Perfection isn't real, Jada. It's your heart, your voice, your spirit that matter. You don't have to be anyone's ideal. You are enough just as you are." Outside the walls of the mansion, Aaliyah faced battles of her own. She was acutely aware of how her role was viewed by others in the household and the community. Despite her growing influence in the family, whispers about her background circulated. Some staff members, ingrained with old prejudices, questioned her authority. Even a few high society guests subtly undermined her when she accompanied the family at events. But Aaliyah refused to let the ignorance of others dim her light. With grace and determination, she proved herself through action, always calm, always professional, and fiercely protective of the family she had come to care for. One afternoon, the twins came home from school looking visibly upset. It wasn't just typical childhood squabbles. They had overheard cruel comments from classmates mocking their mother's absence and whispering about the black maid who had taken their place. Jayden clenched his fists. Why do they hate her? She's the only one who cares. Aaliyah knelt beside them. Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. But you know the truth, and that's what matters. Her words planted seeds of courage in the twins' hearts. Together, they began to confront the whispers, standing proud of the family they were rebuilding. With Aaliyah's guidance, they learned to rise above cruelty, turning pain into strength. The breakthrough came during a lavish charity gala held at the mansion, a world where appearances and status ruled. Mr. Whitmore had reluctantly invited Aaliyah to join the family in the main hall, introducing her not just as a maid, but as the woman who had brought peace to his household. Heads turned, whispers stirred, but Aaliyah held her head high, her dignity radiant. Then, in a moment that stunned the room, Jada stepped forward, holding one of her paintings, a vibrant portrait of the family together, surrounded by light and hope. "This is our family," Jada announced confidently. "We are more than money and titles. We are love and strength." And Aaliyah made that possible. The crowd fell silent, moved by the young girl's courage. Even the harshest skeptics couldn't deny the transformation. Mr. Whitmore stood beside Aaliyah, pride shining in his eyes. "She's not just part of this family," he declared. "She is family." From that night on, the mansion was no longer a fortress of cold wealth, but a home built on respect, understanding, and justice. Aaliyah's journey, from the maid who was underestimated and overlooked to the cornerstone of a healing family, became a beacon of hope. No nanny had lasted with the Millionaire's twins until a black maid did the impossible. Through patience, courage, and unwavering love, Aaliyah changed a family, shattered stereotypes, and restored justice in a world that often forgot what it truly meant. The days following the gala marked a new chapter, not just for the Whitmores, but for Aaliyah herself. Though her role had shifted from outsider to family cornerstone, the road ahead was still lined with hurdles, some visible, others lurking beneath the surface. Early one morning, as the sun cast golden rays over the estate, Aaliyah found herself sitting in the quiet of the library. The walls were lined with leather-bound books and portraits of Whitmore ancestors, symbols of tradition and power that had long overshadowed the true needs of the family. Mr. Whitmore approached quietly, his expression softened from the usual sternness. "Aaliyah, I want to thank you again," he said, voice low but sincere. "I realize now that I was so focused on the empire, I lost sight of what really matters." Aaliyah smiled gently. "It's never too late to change. Sir, families are made by the moments we share, not just the fortunes we build." Their conversation opened a door. Over the next weeks, Mr. Whitmore began setting aside time for his children. He attended Jayden's soccer games, clapped the loudest during Jada's art shows, and, for the first time in years, truly listened when they spoke. Meanwhile, Aaliyah took on a new mission, mentoring the twins not just in behavior but in character, resilience, and self-worth. She taught Jayden the power of patience and focus through martial arts, instilling discipline while nurturing his natural leadership. With Jada, she explored the healing nature of art therapy, encouraging her to paint her feelings and find strength in vulnerability. But not everyone in the mansion welcomed these changes. The housekeeper, Mrs. Beasley, a woman who had served the Whitmores for decades, eyed Aaliyah warily. "You think you're changing things around here? Some things are meant to stay the same," she warned, her voice tinged with bitterness. Aaliyah met her gaze calmly. "Change isn't always easy, Mrs. Beasley, but it's necessary. For the twins, for this family, and for all of us." Tensions rose behind closed doors as Mrs. Beasley whispered doubts to the staff and subtly undermined Aaliyah's authority. Rumors swirled and some staff hesitated, caught between loyalty to old ways and the undeniable new path the family was on. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting day, Aaliyah found herself alone in the kitchen. Mrs. Beasley appeared, folding her arms. "I've been here long before you," she said sharply. "Don't forget your place." Aaliyah took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I respect your service, but I won't let fear hold this family back. We're moving forward together." The confrontation was a test of Aaliyah's strength, but she refused to be intimidated. Instead, she focused on building bridges, inviting Mrs. Beasley to share her stories and wisdom, reminding her that honoring the past and embracing the future could coexist. As the staff slowly rallied behind Aaliyah's vision, a remarkable shift took place. The household transformed from a place of division and silence into a community of support and shared purpose. Back in the family, Jayden and Jada blossomed. Jayden, once rebellious and withdrawn, now stood tall with confidence, leading his friends with kindness. Jada's art was featured in local galleries, her voice growing stronger with every brushstroke. One crisp autumn evening, the family gathered around the fireplace. Mr. Whitmore, for the first time without pretense, thanked Aaliyah in front of everyone. "You didn't just care for my children, you changed their lives. You taught me the meaning of true family." Tears welled in Aaliyah's eyes, but it was Jayden who spoke up, voice steady and proud. "No nanny lasted with us because they never saw who we really were. But you did, Aaliyah. You showed us love is stronger than fear." Justice had been served, not through punishment or power, but through healing, respect, and the courage to change. The mansion was no longer a symbol of wealth's cold grit, but a beacon of hope where a black maid did the impossible. She transformed a fractured family and proved that justice and love go hand in hand. The transformation within the Whitmore household was profound, but it did not happen overnight. Aaliyah's journey was marked by quiet battles and small victories, each one chipping away at the walls of privilege, misunderstanding, and fear that had long enclosed the family. Every morning, Aaliyah rose before dawn, walking the grounds with a purposeful calm. The garden, once neglected and wild, became her sanctuary, a place where she nurtured not just the plants but the fragile roots of trust growing between her and the twins. The air was often cool and crisp, but her resolve burned bright, undeterred by exhaustion or doubt. Jayden, now more willing to share his thoughts, approached Aaliyah one chilly morning while she tended to the rose bushes. His voice was tentative but searching. "Aaliyah, how did you get so strong? Not just outside, but inside." She looked up, brushing soil from her hands. "Strength comes from knowing who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. It's about standing firm when things get hard and choosing kindness even when you don't feel like it." Jayden nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. "I want to be strong like that. For my family." Aaliyah smiled, feeling the weight of her influence and responsibility. "And you will be. But remember, strength isn't just about fighting. Sometimes it's about listening, forgiving, and growing." Meanwhile, Jada spent hours in her makeshift art studio. A corner of the attic Aaliyah had cleaned and transformed into a bright, colorful haven. Paintbrushes, canvases, and charcoal sketches filled the space, creating a vibrant contrast to the rigid formality of the rest of the mansion. Jada's art evolved from simple strokes of color to bold, emotional expressions, paintings that captured pain, hope, and dreams. Aaliyah often sat with her, encouraging her to speak about her feelings and reminding her that her voice mattered. But as the twins grew stronger, so too did the undercurrents of resistance. Mrs. Beasley's quiet hostility simmered beneath polite smiles. She whispered to the staff, planting seeds of doubt about Aaliyah's influence and the changes that upset the old order. Some staff members found themselves caught between loyalty to tradition and the undeniable positive impact Aaliyah had on the family. One rainy afternoon, tensions finally boiled over. Aaliyah overheard a conversation between two longtime staff members criticizing her methods and questioning her place in the household hierarchy. Instead of reacting with anger, Aaliyah called a meeting in the kitchen. She spoke with clarity and compassion. "I know change can be hard," she said, "but this family and this house are bigger than any one of us. We all want what's best for Jayden and Jada. That means working together, respecting each other, and embracing growth." Her words struck a chord. Slowly, the staff began to shift. Mrs. Beasley, though proud and stubborn, found herself softened by Aaliyah's humility and determination. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Mrs. Beasley approached Aaliyah, quietly. "I was wrong to resist you," she admitted, voice thick with emotion. "You've done what none of us could, brought this family back to life." Aaliyah reached out, her smile warm. "Thank you, Mrs. Beasley. We're stronger when we stand together." Outside the mansion, the city buzzed with rumors and skepticism. Some in the community whispered that Aaliyah was overstepping her role. But the Whitmores, transformed by her presence, became a symbol of hope, a family that chose love over wealth, connection over control. Mr. Whitmore began hosting community events at the estate, inviting neighbors, artists, and local leaders to share stories and celebrate diversity. The mansion's grand halls, once reserved for cold business deals, now echoed with laughter, music, and heartfelt conversation. Aaliyah stood at the heart of it all, not just as a maid, but as a leader, mentor, and beloved member of the family. One night, after a successful gala raising funds for a local youth center, Jayden and Jada sat beside her on the terrace, looking up at the stars. "Do you think we're really different now?" Jada asked softly. Aaliyah wrapped an arm around them both. "You've always been special. Now the world can see it too." Jayden smiled. "Thanks to you." Aaliyah's heart swelled. Justice, she realized, was not just about righting wrongs or punishing the guilty. It was about healing wounds, breaking cycles, and building futures where everyone had a chance to thrive. Years later, when the story of the Whitmore family's transformation was told, it was not the tale of a wealthy man reclaiming his family. It was the story of a Black maid who dared to love fiercely, to fight patiently, and to bring justice where it was needed most. No nanny had lasted with the Millionaire's twins until Aaliyah Johnson did the impossible. She didn't just care for 2 children. She restored a family's soul, shattered barriers of class and prejudice, and proved that true strength lies in love, courage, and unwavering justice. The years that followed were nothing short of miraculous. The Whitmore mansion, once a symbol of cold wealth and fractured hearts, blossomed into a home filled with warmth, laughter, and hope. Jayden grew into a compassionate young man, confident in who he was and eager to make a difference in the world. Jada's art gained recognition far beyond the city's borders, her paintings speaking volumes about resilience and beauty born from struggle. And at the heart of it all stood Aaliyah Johnson, the maid who had dared to believe in the impossible and, through patience, love, and unwavering strength, had changed everything. The journey had not been easy. There were days when doubt threatened to consume her, moments when the weight of expectations and prejudice pressed heavily on her shoulders. But Aaliyah's spirit never wavered. She knew that justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about healing wounds, uplifting the broken, and standing firmly for what was right. On the 10th anniversary of her arrival at the mansion, the Whitmores threw a celebration unlike any other. Friends, neighbors, and community members gathered to honor not only the family's transformation, but the woman who made it all possible. Mr. Whitmore took the stage, his voice steady with emotion. "Aaliyah Johnson didn't just come here as our maid. She came as our hope. She saw the children we couldn't see, heard the cries we ignored, and loved us when it was hardest to do so. She is family in every sense of the word." Jayden and Jada stood beside her, their faces glowing with pride and gratitude. And as the applause thundered through the grand hall, Aaliyah looked out at the faces around her, each one touched by the power of love, resilience, and justice. She knew then, without a doubt, that the impossible had become reality. No nanny had lasted with the Millionaire's twins until a Black maid did the impossible. And that's the power of courage, kindness, and justice. If you were inspired by Aaliyah's story and want to hear more powerful tales of strength and triumph, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because here, every story ends with justice, and every voice deserves to be heard. Subscribe now and join us on this journey of hope, healing, and unstoppable courage.